She had done everything she knew to do to try to get out of this situation, and she just couldn't figure it out. And so it took her courage. It took her taking the initiative to really step up to the plate and say, hey, I don't know what I don't know, and I need somebody to help me figure it out. Welcome to the She Takes Initiative podcast. I'm your host, Dalita Savage. As a prophetic voice to this generation, I help women just like you play a bigger game of faith, both in your life and business. If you are a coach, consultant, mentor, or ministry leader who's been trying to launch a high-ticket online program, but you've been struggling to get your business off the ground, then tune in each week as I break down the spiritual principles and business launch strategies you need to launch and sell your online program with more clarity, confidence, and courage. If you're ready to convert more clients, increase your cash flow, and finally step into the life you've always imagined, then head over to shetakesinitiative.com or follow me on Instagram at shetakesinitiative to learn more. Now, let's get into this week's episode. Welcome. I am so glad to have you with me today. This is Dalita Savage. I am the founder of She Takes Initiative. In today's episode, I am going to share with you the backstory of She Takes Initiative. So I want to start out by sharing with you a Bible story that is the foundation of why we even started She Takes Initiative. And it's found in the Christian Bible in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. And I'm reading out of the New King James Version. So 7 short verses, I'm going to read them real quick. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried to Elisha, saying, Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. So Elisha said to her, What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? And she said, Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil. Then he said, Go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the full ones. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. And he said, There is not another vessel. So the oil ceased. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. Now, this story, which I am going to constantly refer to as we go through the different episodes of this podcast, but this story is the foundation of where She Takes Initiative was born, the foundation from which it was born. So when I started really launching into the coaching community, right? I knew nothing about coaching when I started, but I knew God had called me to help women transition into their purpose and transition into business as their platform for purpose. And so I was sitting back one night just really thinking about, what do I call this community that, I'm launching, that God is telling me to build? And I remembered this story out of 2 Kings chapter 4. And it's a story that a pastor of mine in Louisiana used to always talk about and use in her own ministry. And it resonated so deeply with me. And so I just started thinking about the story, really meditating on it, and then breaking it down verse by verse. And what I came to realize, though many historical figures, many theologians attribute this miracle to Elijah, it was actually this woman's courage, her initiative, that even started the process for this creative miracle to manifest. And so the name was born, She Takes Initiative. Because what I realized was that in this story, had this woman not taken the initiative to seek out the man of God who could help her, if she wasn't willing to admit that she was struggling, that she had challenges, that she didn't know what she didn't know, and that she was in a situation that seemed bigger than her, if she wasn't willing to admit that she needed help, she would have never stepped into a process of overcoming the works of the enemy that was in her life. right? And I think many women get to this place where, we find ourselves up against a brick wall. We find ourselves having challenges that we didn't expect in our lives and not knowing how to get past them, but also having the shame and the lack of courage to actually raise our hands and ask for help, right? Can you relate to that? Have you been to that place before where, you've been struggling with something, but afraid to say, hey, I'm going through this situation. I need help. Right. And this is where that woman was. She had lost her husband, and the creditors were coming because she owed a debt, and they were coming to enslave her 2 children, which was totally legal in those days. But she probably, I can imagine that she had done everything she knew to do to try to get out of this situation, and she just couldn't figure it out. And so it took her courage. It took her taking the initiative to really step up to the plate and say, hey, I don't know what I don't know, and I need somebody to help me figure it out. And so she took that initiative, and she goes and she gets help from this man of God who is anointed for her breakthrough, is anointed with strategy, not only to get her out of the debt that she was in, but verse 7 says that she had enough left over that her and her 2 boys could live on. And so that's talking about a multiplied blessing. Truly an anointing for multiplication and acceleration. And that resonated with me because as a prophetic voice to my generation, God has anointed me for acceleration. I remember when I first started learning how anointed I was in that area, and it came through the jobs that I was working in corporate America. No matter what job I took, there were 2 things that were common to every job and every position. Number 1, the company was in transition. And then number 2, I was able to develop systems and strategies and processes that caused acceleration and business growth for them. I mean, it really impacted their bottom line in a significant way. And so when I started to realize that God had not only gifted me that way, but anointed me for acceleration, I knew that that's something I needed to employ in my coaching business. And so she takes initiative, and in those 7 verses in 2 Kings chapter 4 really embody both of those 2 elements of my gifting. And so God really packaged it all together under this brand. I mean, I can't take all the credit, right? It was the Lord's leading that brought me back to this story that I had learned years ago, but really God started to unpackage the principles of what it took for this woman to go from struggling, indebted, fearful, afraid of what her next step would look like and afraid of what her life could become if she didn't figure out this one thing, and her stepping into a place of courage that catapulted her into more money than she knew what to do with. More money than she knew what to do with. And so that's what the She Takes Initiative community is all about. It's helping women who are launching out into their purpose and starting businesses, but not knowing how to get there. And us coming along as that prophetic voice, as that voice of strategy, that voice of clarity, that voice of instruction to really help women, new coaches, new ministers or mentors or, ministry leaders really step up to the plate and have a strategy for more clarity, confidence, and courage to go after the things that God has put in their hearts. And so that's what we do. And that's the foundation of where we started. And so I wanted to share that as the launch of this podcast, so you have an understanding of our foundation, what we stand upon, and the principles we believe in. And so as you listen through the various episodes, I really want you to listen in to your next step. You'll notice that the prophet didn't give her everything at once, right? She comes to him with a problem. The first thing that he did was help her shift her perspective on what was possible. And then he gave her one set of instructions, right? One thing to go and do. And when she followed that instruction, she saw the acceleration, she saw the multiplication, she saw the results, and then she went back to him for the next set of instructions. So every episode is going to give you one instruction to follow, one spiritual principle to unpackage, one business launch strategy to employ in your business. And I only want you listening for your next step. Okay, we don't have to get it all done at one time. Just listen for your next step. So your next step for today's episode, if you are not already following me, either in my email list or on social media, I want you to go and get connected. You can find me on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook at She Takes Initiative. Actually, on Facebook, we're at She Takes Initiative Now. That's a story for another episode. And then on TikTok at She Takes Initiative. But if you want to get on my email list, you can do that through the website at shetakesinitiative.com. And so on the podcast and also every week in my email list, I am releasing spiritual principles and business launch strategies to help you get your business off the ground. So if you've been struggling to put your pieces together, this is definitely a community you want to be plugged into. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And again, welcome to She Takes Initiative. If you enjoyed this week's episode, then go ahead and leave us a review. Let us know what stood out the most. Share the podcast with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe, because each week we are helping you as a coach, consultant, mentor, and ministry leader launch and grow your online programs with clarity, confidence, and courage. So if you are ready to step up to the plate, play a bigger game of faith, and take the initiative to create the life and business that you've always imagined, then stay tuned for the next episode.